There's lots of evidence that, heck, at best, microplastics are not benign for human beings. They probably are cancer causing, cardiovascular issues, endocrine disruptors. So it's affecting our ability to reproduce. And if it affects us that way, it affects wildlife that way, right? We're not that different. It will also affect the ability of plants to take up nutrients, and it will embed itself in the cellular structure of plants. And if it's in plants, it's in animals. And if it's in animals, it's in those of us who eat animals. So the whole thing begets more and more of a cascading problem.
I'm Meg Carney, an outdoor and environmental journalist, and this is the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. Thank you for joining us so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. When we think about our environmental impact in the outdoors, we often focus on things we can't see. Things like litter left behind, the erosion on our trails, overcrowded trailheads, and even piles of dog poop that people leave on the side of the trail. But some of the most significant impacts might be invisible, and they're showing up in places many of us consider as pristine wilderness or backcountry. In episode 208 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we're talking about microplastics found in remote wilderness areas and what new research is revealing about how they actually got there. And joining me to discuss this is Dr. Tim Keyes. Prior to joining Welch College of Business and Technology in 2019, Dr. Keyes was employed by General Electric as a senior risk analytics manager for 22 years. And for 7 years prior to that, he worked as a senior systems engineer at Honeywell. He now consults with banks and nonprofits through his company, Evergreen Business Analytics, LLC. In addition to his professional work, Dr. Keyes leads adventure science expeditions with students to research air and water quality across the Northeast United States. He has summited all of the high peaks in the Adirondack and Catskill Mountains in New York, the Green Mountains in Vermont, and half, to date, of the high peaks in New Hampshire's White Mountains. Professionally, Dr. Keyes has published more than 10 professional papers and holds 17 patents related to risk analytics. His most recent research was published in 2023 in the peer-reviewed Elsevier journal, Helion. And in 2025, an adventure science expedition that he led has received global attention for its potential impact on environmental health and backcountry recreation. So thank you for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast today, Tim. I am really excited about this topic. I think microplastics is one that we talk a lot about outside of the trail, but I think that this will be especially relevant and interesting to all of our listeners because they love to get outside. So before we jump right in, can you give us a little bit about your background and how you actually got interested and began studying microplastics in wilderness areas?
Yes, of course. First off, Meg, thank you very much for hosting this podcast and for bringing this important topic to the attention of your watchers and listeners. And I'm excited to be here and share my experience with how I got here and what we're doing and where we're going with it. So first off, I am a data scientist, and you wouldn't think that data scientists get involved with things like that, but with what we're about to talk about, but more and more that is indeed the case. I am also an avid outdoors person. I've done a ton of trekking throughout the Northeast. I still have goals of accomplishing the summiting of all of the peaks in the Northeast. I'm about halfway through the White Mountains now. And I've been working on that for a couple of decades. And at one point, I asked myself, well, why am I keeping these two worlds separate, right? I'm a data scientist by training. I worked for General Electric for many years, and I'm a consultant and have my own consulting company. And that's sort of that world. And then in order to relieve pressure and to enjoy myself and to reduce stress, I get out and bathe in the natural wonders of the outdoors. And at one point I said, well, why are these not intersecting at all? And so I started measuring things. Data scientists measure things. And I started simply temperature, pH, the things that you can have easy to find and fairly low cost handheld devices for. And then I was also involved in boards of nonprofits, chiefly for outdoor-oriented organizations. such as Adirondack hamlets to huts, which is out of the Adirondack Park in upstate New York. And they do circuits, they guide circuits throughout the Adirondack Park for those who are interested in getting into the backcountry and maybe enjoying the front country in the evening with a nice glass of whatever and a nice meal and get back out into the backcountry to enjoy themselves. Along came an expedition in 2023 where we wanted to guide high schoolers down the entire length of the Hudson River from its source at Lake Tier of the Clouds, high in the Adirondack Mountains at the shoulder of Mount Marcy, all the way down to Manhattan, some 400 miles, solely under human power. This was a summer thing, a couple of weeks of adventure. And I was on the board and I said, well, wait a minute, guys, we have to do some science while we go. And so let's measure for general pollutants, but let's also look at microplastics. And so we did. And that was my first foray into a big expedition that measured microplastics from source to sea. Now, I said I'm a data scientist, so I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So we reached out to the appropriate labs and professionals and experts who know about how to test, know how to do the lab work, and can help us draw the right conclusions from the results that we find. And from that, from the Hudson River Source to Sea expedition, we did find an astonishing set of results that we wanted to verify in 2025. So we went back, and I think much of what we'll talk about are the conclusions that we drew from our return to Lake Tier of the Clouds, the highest source of the Hudson.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about what those results were. So it sounds like you did the initial look in 2023 and then again in 2025. And so what were your major findings from all of that research?
Well, so it all harkens back to the 2023 expedition. We did find a higher than expected amount of microplastics concentration at Lake Tier of the Clouds. And for those listeners and watchers who have not been, and I recommend that they go, uh, Lake Tier of the Clouds is in the middle of nowhere. It's in one of the largest wilderness areas in the eastern United States, again, on the shoulder of Mount Marcy. It's at the confluence of trail systems for a number of the high peaks in that region. So you get a lot of traffic going through that region, some 30,000 in 2024, 30,000 people traipsing through the area, many of which were motivated by achieving the summit on these peaks. So we didn't expect there to be a lot of microplastics like you would see in the front country, which is often generated by your automobile tire fragmentation, by detritus that's thrown out the car window, in the form of plastic bottles and cosmetics and things that we put in the wash, and then they go in the ecosystem through the wash that way, through wastewater treatment plants and are not filtered out that way. We did not expect that at such a pristine, what we thought was a pristine location as Lake Tier of the Clouds. We thought maybe if there were any microplastics, it would be wafting in through airborne deposition. We did have, as I said, a higher than the normal level, higher than expected level. And so we wanted to go test that. In 2025, we went back to confirm those initial results, but also we added in a twist. There is a nearby water body called Moss Pond, which is also a source of the Hudson. It is independent. It's an independent source of the Hudson and is nowhere near these trails. It doesn't get the traffic. You have to bushwhack. It's a slog, I can tell you. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done to find our way to Moss Pond. But we wanted to test there as well as retest Lake Tier of the Clouds. They're so nearby. They're in the same location for the most part, I think 3/4 of a mile or a mile between the two. So if any airborne deposition comes in, it would be affecting both the same way. And if it's hiker traffic, we would pick that up at one location and not the other. So what we found was that there were 20 plus times more microplastics concentration at Lake Tier of the Clouds than there were at Moss Pond, which is indicative of hiker traffic. If it had been a higher level at Moss Pond, and Moss Pond, by the way, was very, very low, not unlike the results that my wife and I achieved when we went to Denali Park in Alaska. So very pristine. If it was coming in through airborne deposition, you would see similar amounts because of the proximity of these two water bodies to one another. So we were astonished. And once we got the lab results back, we could only conclude, and we are not the first to conclude this, that hiker traffic is generating microplastics and microfibers in the backcountry.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't necessarily surprising, but I think it's an important study to demonstrate just like how humans really do impact these pristine ecosystems. And so I guess what are the main drivers in our shedding of microplastics when we do actually get out to these spaces? Because we do wear a lot of plastic, our shoes, our clothing, our backpacks, even like the snack packages that we're bringing. So is it like a combination of those things, or were you able to narrow it down to any specifics?
Yeah. So the short answer is your premise is that we are wearing a lot of plastics nowadays. It's not like the old days, and we're told not to wear cotton anymore, and I think that's still a very good idea. Although cotton is a natural fiber, and if you shed just through wear and tear your Levi's jeans or whatever jeans, that's not going to cause a problem in the backcountry. The dyes may, and I'm not an expert on that, but it won't cause the same environmental or human health issues or animal health issues that a fragment of polymer would. So to distinguish different types of testing, we did testing for concentration. There's also testing for type of polymer, which would give a signature or fingerprint, if you will, on where specifically that microfiber or microplastics came from. It came from a shirt, it came from shoes, it came from your backpack. It is probably not consumer waste like wrappers and things like that. You tend not to find that at all in at least this portion of the Adirondack High Peaks. And other studies have found, and it's coincidental that in 2023, a peer-reviewed publication was made by Forster, is the name, et al., out of Australia, where they did a controlled study where they evaluated synthetic clothing and trail running shoes from very soft rubber up to hard rubber. And they found that trail runners will generate 1 particle of microplastics per linear meter per walker. And so if you multiply that by 30,000 and how long the trail is, and then everything washes downhill, you're going to get a concentration of microplastics. Microfibers can be up to 2 microfibers per linear meter per walker. So this stuff will build up. And maybe one last footnote on this vein of discussion is that you might ask, well, how much worse is soft rubber than, say, hard rubber, the old hiking shoes that we used to wear, right? And by the way, I've gone back to start wearing them more often because I, like other people, switched to trail runners. I mean, they're lighter. They noticeably wear faster. I knew that. And they're not all created equal. But trail runners of the soft sole variety will generate 300% more microplastics than a hard rubber sole. So they wear faster. And again, not all of them, not all trail runners or shoe manufacturers are created equal. What I started doing, just sort of foreshadowing where we might want to go with this, I started monitoring my shoes. I don't have just one pair of shoes that I wear like others, perhaps. I have multiple pairs of shoes, from trail runners all the way up to hard-soled big boots. And I find that within 100 miles of use, some of the trail runners, the cleats will wear off, just off. And some of that might be my gait, my height, my weight, and all of that. But I have other shoes that wear to 300 miles. So That's how this is generating. Not unlike your car tires, we are through abrasion, through blasting through. These trails are not all wide open, right? You're blasting through brush, cripple brush, as the case may be in the Adirondacks. You're rubbing up against things. You're sitting down. Things get abraded, and eventually those fibers and those particles will release themselves into the environment and then go with wherever the water flows.
Yeah, the shoe aspect is so interesting because I don't think it's something that we think about that often. And it's also really alarming because I think of really frequented trails like the PCT or the Appalachian Trail, those through hikes that people are often wearing trail runners, and then they're running through multiple pairs over the course of a couple of months. And so the comparison to tires, I think, is a good way to put it because, like, conceptually, it is a similar
It's the same
concept.
thing. That's
Yeah.
right.
So have there been other looks at this regarding trail runners? I know you mentioned one study, but in other areas and regions, similar to the way that you looked at a remote source.
Yes, I believe there have been studies in Boundary Waters, canoe area in Minnesota, and in other national parks. As a matter of fact, the study that I did cite was, I believe, in a national park. So there are plenty of studies, and what I found, and your listeners and viewers will find that if you start Googling or AIing um, microplastics in the backcountry, you will get regular feeds of news articles and findings along those lines in your favorite parks around the world. So that I find is astonishing, but it's also sort of a relief that globally we're coming to a conclusion with through awareness that we need to do something about this. And I think through efforts like that and just the omnipresence of findings such as ours and others, the manufacturers will make a change because I'm sure every one of your listeners and watchers, like you, Meg, we love the outdoors. We're not going to stop using the outdoors, and nor should we, right? It's just the manner of how we approach that and how much of a trade-off are we willing to make between convenience and stewardship, right? And I know your podcast is named Outdoor Minimalist, and we've all sort of gone minimal, right? But one thing we might want to draw back is how minimal a shoe do we want, right? I used to think that, going up in the White Mountains, that the people who were hiking the White Mountains barefoot, that they were crazy. And now I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe they're onto something, because they're not leaving anything behind other than maybe blood and skin. But we're not talking about that today.
Yeah, I mean, the shoes being one of the primary factors in the shedding of microplastics when we're on the trail make the most sense to me because it's where we're experiencing the most abrasion.
Right.
But when you're looking at other microfibers that you're finding, were there ones that were coming off of our clothing or other textiles as well?
I think it's a variety of both. Some types of fibers are more apt to be shed. So, like polyester fleece, I think is a notable one. Polyester generally, acrylic also, and I think generally speaking, any loosely woven fabric will not endure very well, even if it's cotton or wool. It will eventually shed. And if your listeners and viewers are like me, you'll keep your hiking gear forever, right? And you'll just keep wearing it. And this stuff has a profile of its life, right? Early on, you probably have a little bit more shedding because of loose threads and that sort of thing. It sort of gets into its stable mode, and then towards the end of its life, it's wearing faster, right? Because maybe the fabric itself has gotten looser, more porous, and it tends to degrade faster. That's my understanding of the life cycle of a garment. The shoe, and maybe we don't care if it has a few holes here and there in what we wear on our top because heck, we're getting dirty anyway, right? And we're out there precisely to get messy. But as you pointed out, your feet are what touches the ground most often, and you will notice that right away. If you have knee problems, hip problems, ankle problems, you're probably particularly mindful of your shoes. And one of the reasons perhaps why you go with a soft sole and with a trail runner. So, and those things you just have to balance, how you would approach that problem and still enjoy the backcountry. And again, no one is saying not to go out and enjoy the backcountry, because we want more and more people to do that. These places are designated wilderness and are preserved precisely because there are people like your listeners and viewers and you and me, Meg, out there enjoying it. And the sheer numbers of people who enjoy the backcountry are what's keeping the motivation to continue to preserve and steward these landscapes. So
Yeah.
hopefully that answers your
Oh,
question.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, as individuals, of course, we do have power, but I don't think for a lot of these larger issues that it should necessarily be up to the average person to make all of the decisions. And so, have you been seeing any outdoor gear manufacturers responding to this issue in any way? And do you see like a potential for change within the industry itself?
Yes, indeed I have. And so directly in my experience, I've seen that Patagonia, and everyone probably understands that that is an organization that does have a conscience and they want to do the right thing. Patagonia stands out. REI, who is a sponsor of some of our expeditions, also is getting involved in this stewardship, and it's just a sustainable garment life cycle. Uh, I believe others are as well. Now, through my endeavors, I've run across organizations that are actively trying to work and persuade and motivate garment manufacturers, garment suppliers, and shoe suppliers to change their supply chain and their manufacturing process and their choices for fabrics and composition. And among those that stand out are the Rosalia Project, and the Rosalia Project is actively trying to change the garment industry to have a more sustainable and durable set of offerings. And similarly, for footwear, it's the Footwear Collective is another organization that's trying to do the same thing, to make a circular economy and one that does not shed, no pun intended, does not shed its the very nature of the composition out in the backcountry. So I think momentum is building, and hopefully we'll see more and more of that type of thing. But to your point, we can't wait for a solution to come at us from our suppliers. Every purchase decision that we make, every time we suit up, that is a point where you can have some sort of mitigating effect on what you're leaving behind in the backcountry. Your choice of what shoes to take, what to wear, how to layer what you wear. What do you do when you come home and you just throw it in the wash? We have to remember the front country is getting contaminated too. So, for example, Patagonia has something called a guppy friend, where you can throw your synthetics in the bag and put that in the wash. You wash the bag and you take your synthetics out of that, and hopefully in the bottom of the bag will have been deposited any fibers, and you could more properly dispose of that rather than just having it go into your well or into the drainage system for your area.
Yes, I do want to talk a little bit about some of those like product and buying choices in a little bit more detail. I know earlier you mentioned a big difference between the soft rubber and the hard rubber. So, do you think that's the most significant change that we can be making, or are there other areas where we could improve and reduce the amount that we're shedding on the trail?
That would be a significant change, Meg. That's for sure. Uh, Now, and there may not be that great of a price point anymore between, say, good trail runners and a hard soled boot or shoe. Now, the weight, you're going to have to contend with the weight of the shoe. And so a lot of us went to trail runners because we didn't want to carry 4 pounds on each foot, right, or whatever it is. Big clunky clod hoppers, right? But those clod hoppers are durable; they will last forever. I still have a pair of the ones that I climbed most of the Adirondack high peaks in, and I finished in 2012, and they're still doing great. But you pay up for some of those. So, and if that price point sort of puts you out of the market for a more durable change, then maybe you can spread out the expense and just evaluate your shoes. Every time, come back and look at your soles. Are the cleats wearing? Are they wearing evenly? Are they wearing faster than you would expect? Talk with your retailer and tell them that you have concerns and you have a desire to go for more of a durable cleat, one that will last you 3 or 4 or 500 miles of horizontal movement, and something that only wears to 100. You give that feedback to the retailer too, and say, and now that puts them in a quandary because they probably like it that it wears out after 100 miles, because then you come back and buy another pair. And if you only buy one pair for a little bit more expense every couple of years, they don't see you as often. So own that relationship with your shoes, with your supplier, and just monitor things, and make the right choice every time you go out, but continue to go out.
Yeah, I'm always for contacting the actual company or manufacturer or like the brand because I do think similar to contacting our representatives, like the more people that are expressing a need or a desire or a concern, the more likely they are to listen. So I think that's a great point. And beyond personal gear choices, then, are there other ways that we can advocate for reducing microplastics in wilderness areas?
Well, one more part about what we can do. I don't think we're going to get rid of our synthetic clothing right away, right? I'm wearing some right now, and probably the next time I go out and hike, I'll wear some. But what I've learned is that, among the reasons why we like the synthetic clothing is that it's wicking, right? And so it'll keep you dry, will keep you warm uh, when you need to be. So if you wear your synthetic clothing bottommost in your layering, then at least it's contained within your person, right? And outside of that, you can wear more natural fibers, wool if it's cold, or something that is in a part of its life cycle that's less likely going to shed, right? And then at least you've contained the problem and you're taking it out. Even if it's shedding, you're taking it out with you. Um, and then aside from that, getting this message out and making sure that your hiking buddies, your skiing buddies, your biking buddies, everyone is aware of this issue. All of us, I think, formally or perhaps informally, are adherents to the 7 leave no trace principles. But we probably would not have thought of this as being one of the things that we're leaving behind that we should not be. And it really should be part of that education. So when we think about leave no trace, and we think about microplastics being one and the same in the backcountry, and bringing this to the attention of our hiking buddies, our retailers, our shoe manufacturers, I think the more awareness that we create, the better. Social media is wonderful for this. And there's a downside to that because you got a lot of people who just like, I'll hike however I want to hike, right? And yeah, I guess we can't stop people from having that opinion, but they're wrong, and they can make a change, right? As slight as it may be, as minor as it may be for now, but eventually we'll move this whole thing to where it needs to be, and we'll be leaving less microplastics in the backcountry and creating less of a toxicity in the backcountry. There's lots of evidence that, heck, at best, microplastics are not benign for human beings. They probably are cancer causing, cardiovascular issues, endocrine disruptors. So it's affecting our ability to reproduce. And if it affects us that way, it affects wildlife that way. right? We're not that different. It will also affect the ability of plants to take up nutrients, and it will embed itself in the cellular structure of plants. And if it's in plants, it's in animals. And if it's in animals, it's in those of us who eat animals. So the whole thing begets more and more of a cascading problem. And it seems like we all want to keep these areas as pristine as possible. So we should all be doing our part in as large a way as you can. But any small steps like we've discussed would be useful too.
Yeah, I mean, it is all connected. And I am grateful that you took the time to do this research and follow up on it to kind of get the message out. I know that there's been some great articles covering this as well. So I'll be sure to link to that so people can learn more about your work and the growing microplastic issue that we're experiencing across the country and the world. But are there ways for listeners to learn more about your research and general microplastic pollution in the backcountry?
Yes, and I would be very grateful for their continued interest. As I mentioned earlier, I've done a few more expeditions since the two that we've talked about and have others planned for 2026. And they're all of a similar variety, looking at source to sea or source to downstream water body microplastics assessments. I tend to involve students, high schoolers, and we tend to make documentaries of the adventure to be inspiring to other high schoolers who want to get out in the backcountry and didn't realize that the nature can be a really cool lab, and you might not like the lab that's under the rooftop, but if you can do this stuff in the backcountry, then how cool is that? So I would monitor the websites of the partners that I have, like Adirondack Hamlets to Huts. So we will be announcing the results of some of these expeditions that I happen to work through them. They can reach out to me via email, and I can be reached at tim.keyes, that's Keyes, at egbana, egbana.com. That's Evergreen Business Analytics.com. And monitor social media. They can reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, and anything that I do in the backcountry along these lines or the front country, I will post on LinkedIn and Facebook. But LinkedIn tends to be more of a professional, and we'll get into maybe more scientific details on that format, that forum.
Awesome. I'll be sure to include the links to all of those as well as other resources you mentioned throughout our conversation in the show notes. So if people want to learn more, they can easily do that there. But with
Great.
that, thank you so much, Tim, for your research and, of course, sharing your time with us here today.
Thanks to you and to your listeners and viewers for their interest. And I look forward to everyone participating in this effort. It's going to take all of us to resolve this. It's a very big problem. Maybe many of your listeners are much younger than I, but at the way back in the early 60s, there was a problem with DDT that was being spread as a toxic pesticide and herbicide. And it took Rachel Carson, who was brave enough to point out that this was causing a silent spring, the birds were dying, and so on. It was more noticeable back then because you could see the DDT being spread and you can see those knock-on effects. This is a different problem, right? This is a more silent, pervasive issue, but one that with studies like this and other knock-on studies, we'll be able to get our arms around and come up with a solution. So thanks to everyone for being mindful of these messages and to helping me and the nature itself own some of it.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.